Hello everyone, welcome to this session on creating a full stack application like Netflix by Intellipaat. Today in this session, we will be going through the system design architecture of Netflix and also helping you know how you can create APIs, which probably Netflix is also using these days for their website, right? Today we will be dividing this session among two trainers, right? So I am going to explain you the system design architecture of Netflix, right? And this is how basically, applications or are also designed when, it is basically on the sketchbook. So for example, let's say you want to open an application like Netflix, or you want to open your own website. The first thing that you do is you write down the features that you want to have on your application, right? And then that application is then designed for resiliency. It is designed for failovers. And then once the plan is laid out, the architecture is deployed, and then and the parallel your development team also starts to work. So similarly, today as well, we will be dividing this session in two parts. The first part, I'm going to explain you some of the common, system design architectures, how Netflix has basically went ahead and solved modern day problems which you see with video streaming platforms. I will be explaining you that. And later, we have our developer from the team. His name is Anirudh. He will be explaining you how you can basically go ahead and create simple APIs that are also there on the Netflix page that you use every day but you might not know. Okay, all right. So guys, let's start the session. So let me first tell you the agenda for today. So the agenda is to understand the Netflix system design. That is how Netflix basically goes ahead and is tackling a lot of problems that a modern day video streaming app has, right? And the second thing that we're going to go ahead and understand is, once we have identified the features that Netflix provides, once we have identified how Netflix basically works, how to build an application from over there, right? So that would be second part of our session today, which would be building Netflix APIs. Apart from that, whatever architecture that we are going to deploy, that we're going to discuss today, and the code, the backend that we are going to deploy today, which we are going to create today, we are also going to show you how to deploy it on a cloud, from scratch in tomorrow's session. Right now, we're going to start off with Netflix system design, and then we're going to move on with Netflix APIs. Okay, so let's start with the session, guys. For those of you who are not knowing what Netflix is, I'm pretty sure everyone knows about it, but still, if there's anyone who doesn't know about what Netflix is, let me give you a brief intro as to what Netflix is. Okay, so guys, Netflix is basically a premium video streaming platform, and it has around active 500 million users around the globe, right? And it offers a wide variety of videos to see, from series to movies to documentaries to even comedy genres, and all these are hosted on one platform, and with a simple click you can watch any video you want on that Netflix streaming platform. Okay, now having said that, there are a few things that you have to keep in mind. For example, when you talk about a video streaming platform like YouTube, now YouTube is something which is free for all, right? So even if, let's say, there's a downtown time on YouTube, it won't affect their user base much. But when we talk about a premium service like Netflix, where people are paying monthly for the content that they see, Netflix has to ensure a lot of things, before they can actually provide a service to the customer. Now, what are those things? For example, if, let's say, the video that you are seeing, it takes a lot of buffering time, right? Then I think for a lot of you, you would not be interested to see that platform, right? Now, when people subscribe to a Netflix streaming service, right, they come from all walks of life. Some people might not have a good internet connection, right? Some people might not have a laptop. Some people might have a very old phones. So how is Netflix tackling all these problems is something that we're going to understand, because that is what their business model is. That is how they're earning their bread and butter, right? So that's why they have put in place a lot of measures to basically address or basically take into account the different kind of people who are subscribed to their service, and we will be discussing that as we move along. Okay, so how does Netflix manages, low latency? Now, for those of you who are from non-tech background, you might not know what low latency is. So, guys, low latency is nothing but, when you click on the Netflix app, it should just not buffer. It should play a video. So, how does Netflix ensure that they give you the lowest response time possible? That is, it gives you the video right away. The only hurdle that you might have is your internet speed. How does Netflix ensure that their servers are all fully available to all their users, even if it's 100 million or a 200 million or even a 500 million user base which is watching at the same time? So let's understand that. So guys, Netflix makes use of something which is called as a content delivery network, right? So what is a content delivery network? So let me basically show you from the illustration that we have over here. Okay, so guys, this is your Netflix original server. Okay, now what do you mean by an original server? Now, as you all might know, that Netflix is basically a US company, right? So, when it's a US company, it makes sense that the company, when it must have launched, it must have, had servers which were there in the US region, right? Now, what do I mean by that? So let's say when we as a company we are Intellipaat.com, right? Most of our users they reside in the US and in India. Now we have users from other parts of the country as well, other part of the globe as well, but most of our users they reside in India and in the US. Okay. Now, when we talk about the servers that we have as a company, all our servers are basically deployed in India, right? So, but that is something which was, causing us a problem. Why? Because uh, if you talk about the distance, so let's talk about it in very simple terms. So when you, let's say, are living in a country, let's say over here, right? And when you have to, basically access a server which is residing in the US, this is the distance that you will be covering. Similarly, let's say you are residing over here as a user, and this is the distance that you are covering for accessing the server which is for Netflix. Now, obviously, the content, if you are trying to access from this server, it will reach out to you faster than a user who is residing in a country which is, as far as, this particular circle over here. Okay. So, how do you go ahead and give your content in the same response time possible, irrespective of the fact that the customers are living in different, locations of the world? Now, one thing that you can do is you can deploy a server in each and every country, right? And then basically, route every user to that particular server so that, let's say if you're in US, you will be basically going to the US server. If you are in India, you'll be going to the Indian server. If you are in a country like Africa, you'll be going to the African server, and it goes on. So it depends on where you're accessing, the service, and based on that, you're connected to the respective server. Now, this sounds good, but it is a very expensive, operation when you think about the kind of investment that you might have to make to create this kind of an architecture, right? Let's say, for example, you and me, we try tomorrow to open a startup, which is again a video streaming service, or which say, let's say, is an internet company, right? Which basically has its own product which users have to use. And if our aim is to provide our users with the best, service possible, we would also want to have an architecture where all our servers are deployed in every country of the continent, and so as to give the lowest latency possible to every user, right? But let's say you don't have that kind of an investment, so what would you do? So that's why we have things like cloud. So we have cloud providers like AWS, we have cloud providers like Azure, which basically provide us with infrastructure. Okay, so now let me tell you how Netflix is solving this problem. So Netflix was again a startup in its early years, and what it did was, so let's say this is the place where they have their original server. So there is a service, in cloud, which is called a content delivery network. Now, what is a content delivery network? A content delivery network, basically what it does is it deploys or it has servers in many parts of the world, right? So that is basically taken care of by your cloud provider. For example, let's talk about cloud providers like Amazon. Let's talk about cloud providers like Azure, like Google Cloud. So all these people, they are very big companies who can afford this kind of an infrastructure. Now, what they have done is they've made us, they've made available a service which is called, a content delivery network to the general public, and so that people like you and me can go ahead and deploy our content over there, and they will make it available to the rest of the world. Okay, so these servers which basically reside in countries, these servers are called edge servers. And it's not like your whole application will be deployed on these servers. These servers basically only serve static content. Okay, now I've used a lot of jargons over here. I've used jargons like low latency, I've used jargons like edge servers. I've used jargons like static content. So let me clear up then one by one. Okay. So when you talk about your original server, so there's a difference between something called as dynamic content. So you have something called as dynamic content. Dynamic content is nothing but a content which changes. Okay. Whenever there is a change, it's called dynamic content. And static content basically means no change. So when there is no change, it's called static. And dynamic basically means when there is a change. Now, what happens is that when you talk about a streaming service like Netflix, what is the content that you're dealing with? Okay, so I would want everyone's contribution over here. What is the kind of content that you're dealing with when you talk about a service like Netflix? Now, let me put down a question for you. Now, when the movies that you see on Netflix, right? Those movies are all same. They're not changing, right? They're all the same. Everyone in the world, if they want to see Avengers as a movie, everyone will see the same movie, right? So is it dynamic or is it static? All right. So let me make it more simple for you guys. There is something called as dynamic files. Now, what do you mean by dynamic files? Let's say, let's assume that you go to youtube.com, okay, and you search for a particular video. So when you're searching for a particular video, the video rankings, they differ, right? For example, let's talk about the trending page of YouTube. So the trending page of YouTube changes according to views which are coming onto the channel, or which are coming on the video. So your trending page is dynamic. Why? Because every time it has to go back to the database to see how many views have come in, how many likes have come in, and accordingly its algorithm then says, okay, so this video should be trending number one, this video should be trending number two, so on and so forth, right? So dynamic content basically means which changes in real time, which changes when time passes by. That is what dynamic content means. So if you talk about the trending page of YouTube, that is dynamic. Why? Because every time you load the trending page of YouTube, it will always give you the latest videos that you have to see. Let me give you one more example. When you talk about news channels, right, or when you talk about news websites, so every day when you log into your news websites, the list of news, they change, right? So you are always given fresh content. So that homepage of that news website is dynamic. But when you talk about the news itself, right? Let's say the newspaper has published news today on its website. That news is not going to change. So that news now is static. I hope you guys understand the difference. So when you are dealing with a website, you have a web page which in which
probably the content is not going to change. In that case, the web page will be static. And if the content is going to change based on the changes or based on the dynamics which are going around that content, in that case it will be a dynamic page. Let me open Netflix for you guys and let's try to answer it from there. So let's go to netflix.com. So this is netflix.com, guys. Now what happened here, this page got loaded automatically, right? So this page, it has new movies added to it time and again, and that's why this page is dynamic. But let's say I play a movie. Let's say I play a movie like, let's say, Founder, right? So when I'm playing this movie is now static. Why? Because the Founder movie, if you open it on your computer, right, it will be the same. If I'm opening it on my system, it is the same, right? And as you can see, this movie got opened in a separate web page, all right? But let's say so, and also notice the time that this video takes to load. Now a video is a lot much size in MBs, right? But still it does not take only 10 seconds for the movie to start. But when you talk about the netflix.com page, here you can see as I'm scrolling, it is still loading the page. Can you see? And when you compare the type of content which is coming on a video than what is coming over here on the web page, it's completely different in size, right? So this page is taking a lot of time to load, but when you compare it to your video, it's taking very less time to load. Although the size that you have of both the web pages is massively different, right? So when you're dealing with the home page of Netflix, that's dynamic, and when you're opening any video in Netflix, that is something which is static content. But for now, is everyone clear with respect to the content that we are dealing with on Netflix? That the content that we consume actually, it is static. Is everyone clear with that? Great. Okay. So now let's go ahead and understand how Netflix is managing its data. So let me just remove what I wrote earlier. So now since everybody is clear with what dynamic and static content is, so now what happens is Netflix has all their movies on the original server, and what they do is they make use of a content delivery network by their cloud provider. Now, as you might know, Netflix is hosted completely on AWS for all their needs, except their CDN, which is basically hosted by a company called OpenConnect. Okay, so OpenConnect basically gives them all these servers, which are edge locations, where they can basically put their static content, right? And this process is called caching, right? So using caching, what they do is they put all their movies, they put all their static content on the edge servers. And when you as a user want to use that application or that or want to view that video, it gets to you in the shortest time possible because of this particular architecture. So this is called a content delivery network. And this is also something that we are going to deploy tomorrow when our application is ready. Okay. So this is an architecture that they follow for static content. Now let's move forward and let's ask a different type of questions. How does Netflix basically give you multiple video resolutions? Okay, so there is something called as video encoding and transcoding. Okay, now what that basically means is when let's say I am the Netflix company and I want to publish uh, the movie Avengers on my channel or on my streaming platform. So what will I do? So what Netflix does is it first approaches the production company who made that movie, and they say, you know what, I want that movie to be published on my platform. So what do I have to do? So basically, the production company will sell the rights to Netflix, using some deal, and when the deal is over, the production company hands over the content to Netflix. Okay, so let's say I'm getting the movie Avengers. So what you see in your mobile today, that Avengers movie, even if you're streaming it in 4K, the maximum size of that movie is going to be around 10 to 11 GB. right? But when you talk about the actual movie which is coming from the production company, it's in hundreds of GBs, because that is the kind of quality that they create the movie with. That is the kind of detail that each scene in that movie has, right? Now, obviously, if a movie is around hundreds of GBs, you and I, as a normal consumer, we will not watch it, because if I have to download one movie for 100 GB, probably that will end my entire internet plan, right? So that is something that I cannot afford to do. So that's where these streaming companies, they come in, and what they do is they transcode and they encode the video. Okay, and how do they do that? So first of all, let's understand what are the different operations which are involved, in uh, converting a video, and why do we actually do it. Okay, so when we are dealing with the video, first of all, what we have to make sure of is that every device which is out there, which is using my platform, that device should be able to use, or you should be able to play my video. Okay, so that means if someone is using Netflix on their tab, they should be able to use it. If someone is using Netflix on their laptop, they should be able to use it. If somebody is using Netflix on their TV, they should be able to use it. If somebody is using Netflix, let's say on any other device which might have a different screen resolution, everybody should be able to use it. Okay. So first thing is, I have to make sure that the movie that I am basically converting, or the movie that I am having on my platform, it should have the desired screen resolution so that everybody on their own device can watch it. Now, how do I deal with that? So what I do is, every content that I have to stream, or all the kind of devices that I have to stream to, I will have a different copy of movie for all those devices. Okay. So if I'm dealing with an iPhone, I know what the resolution of an iPhone is. So iPhone for the iPhone, I will have a different resolution of movie. Okay. So let's say this is iPhone. If I am dealing with an iPad, then I will have a different resolution of movie. Okay. If I am dealing with a MacBook, again, the resolution is different, right? So I will be dealing with a different resolution of movie. So on and so forth. There are so many devices out there which will have different screen resolutions. I will go ahead and have a video for each of these devices. This is the first thing that I do. Okay. Now comes the problem of having videos in different formats. For example, videos can be in 4K, videos can be in 1080p. Somebody might want to view the movie in 4K, somebody might want to see it in 1080. Then you have 720, right? Then you have 480p, then you have 360, then you have 240, then you have 144, right? So all these are different resolutions, that all these are different sizes of my video that everybody might want to watch. Now, the part over here which is interesting to know is, these things, they switch between each other, right? Let's say if you're watching a movie in 1080 and you want to switch to 720p, you can do that by selecting the video quality option and changing that to a resolution that you want, right? And then the movie starts to play from there, but in that particular resolution. So how does that happen? So Netflix maintains a copy of each and every video resolution that you want to watch on your device. Same goes with YouTube, same goes with any other platform. There is no algorithm which can which will on the fly convert a video according to what the user wants, right? It will take a lot of time, and that's why we do not do it by algorithms. What we do is we maintain separate copies of each resolution that we want to stream to our users. And at the same time, we also maintain copy according to different devices. On an iPhone, the movie will be different in size, because the screen size is different. On iPad, it will be different, and on a MacBook also, it will be different. So all these resolutions, the 4K resolution, They will be both. They will be for iPhone also. They will be for iPad also, and it will be for the MacBook also. Similarly, a 1080p video, it will be for the iPhone also, for the iPad also, for the MacBook also. So that's how you basically go ahead and create this kind of content first before you can make it available to the users. Okay, then what you do is you make it available on a central location where all your movies are stored. Okay, so somebody pointed out that Netflix was using S3 before and now they're using OpenConnect. So now for all of us to understand, let me put it like this. So all of you might be aware of something called as Google Drive. Okay, so what I will do is, let's say if I have to upload a movie called Avengers, so I will create a folder on Google Drive. So I will have a Google Drive folder. Now in that Google Drive folder, what I will do is I will create a folder called Avengers. Now in this Avengers folder, what I will do is I will put in all the video files that I have encoded and transcoded, basically, which are basically in different resolutions, which are in different formats, and everything will be stored over here. Okay, and now based on what the user is asking, my Google Drive link will keep on changing. If I am asking, so link one, let's say it's for 4K video, right? Link one is for 4K video. Link two, let's say it's for 1080p video. So whenever you change your resolution on your device, right? Let's say this is your mobile device. So whenever you change the resolution over here, your link changes to the video that you were streaming from, right? And then suddenly you get that video streamed to uh, your device, and that's how see that particular resolution on your phone. So this is how it works when it comes to the different resolutions that we deal with every day without even us knowing when our internet connection becomes slow. Okay, so before we move ahead, I want to tell you one more thing. Now, let's say this is the Google Drive that we're dealing with. So when you want to use a Google Drive in cloud, when you want to use an equivalent service of Google Drive in cloud with unlimited storage, so let's say what Netflix uses is something called as AWS S3. So all their movies they store on this Google Drive like service, and what they then do is they enable the content delivery network on this folder that they have created in AWS S3. Now, when they make the content delivery enabled on this AWS S3 folder, which is nothing but having your movie, all these resolutions that you basically converted and stored in this folder are then distributed among all the servers which are there across the world, and every server will now have all those resolutions stored in them. And now you as a user, when you will be sitting in a location trying to access that video, you will be connected to the nearest edge location where the quality of video that you want to see will be available and which will be streamed to your device. Okay, so guys, now let's go ahead and understand, because that is something which I have also planned for you guys to explain. How does video recommendation basically work? Okay, so let's try to understand that. So what is recommendation? Recommendation basically means, let's say uh, I am basically dealing with videos today, right? And I want to see uh, how will Netflix identify what kind of movies I will like for next to see. And most of the times, what Netflix recommends me as videos, they're all correct, right? Probably that is the kind of movie that I want to watch. You would have seen a similar pattern even on an streaming platform like YouTube, where YouTube basically recommends you different kinds of videos that you might be interested to watch. Now, all of them you might not be interested to watch, but most of them is something that you are interested to see and you click on that, right? A similar thing you would have also seen when you play music videos on a streaming platform like YouTube. Sometimes the next song that is going to play after the video that you have played is something that is actually something that you want to listen to. So how is that managed, or how is that taken care of by a video streaming platform? Let's understand that. All right, now let's talk about how the Netflix recommendation basically works. Okay, so guys, when you deal with Netflix recommendation, again, how does Netflix know which kind of movies to recommend you? Let's try to understand that process. All right, guys. So there are, when you talk about recommendation, so this is basically called a recommendation engine. Okay, so what is a recommendation engine? A recommendation engine basically deals with two kind of things, or it can basically be created in two kind of ways. One is collaborative filtering and the other is content based filtering. What is the difference between the two? So collaborative filtering basically means, let's say you and I, we both are on Netflix. Okay, now I as a user, uh, so you would have seen when you sign up on Netflix and when you're setting up your account, it asks you which movies would you be interested in. English movies, Hindi movies, Punjabi movies, or some other language movies. You select the movie that you want, or the movie language that you want, and then you click on next. Then it'll ask you the different kind of genres that you will be interested in. For example, action movies, comedy movies, romantic movies. So all these you select, and what you're doing is in the backend, Netflix is trying to identify what is your kind of interest that you're dealing with. Okay, and based on that it is creating a user profile for you, right? So that is what Netflix is doing in the backend, and based on this user profile that you create, it basically recommends you stuff, right? And now it does it on in two ways. So let's say there are two people, as you can see on the screen, who basically answered these questions when they were signing up on Netflix, and they basically selected the same kind of answers. Okay, now what happens is when let's say this lady, she logs into Netflix and she watches a movie, right? And she watches that movie in entirety. She watches the whole movie from starting to end. That basically means that that movie had engaged her, and people who are similar to her, people who opted for the same kind of choices as she did, this movie can be recommended to other people, right? Similarly, let's say this guy also logs in into Netflix after selecting the same things as she did, and he watched a movie which basically he also watched in entirety, right? Let's say she watched a movie called, um, let's take the example of Avengers again. She watched a movie called Avengers, which was packed with action, which had all the good heroes in it, right? She watched two or three scenes repetitively, which probably had Chris Hemsworth involved in it, and then that by that Netflix analyzes, okay, so at this particular point in time, you'd have the actor involved in the scene was Chris Hemsworth, so probably this user likes Chris Hemsworth. Okay, so next time for this particular lady, when Netflix is again going to recommend videos, it is going to recommend videos more of Chris Hemsworth, right? But on the other hand, let's talk about, she watched Avengers, right? Now this guy, he watched, let's say, a movie like Lagan on Netflix. So Lagan is a Hindi movie. Some of you might not know about it, but let's say he watched Lagan on his movie, as since his preferences were also about Hindi movies, and she also chose to watch Hindi movies. So this lady will also be recommended Lagan now. Why? Because she chose that she liked action movies, she liked romantic movies, she probably liked historical movies as well, and this guy also liked historical movies, right? So based on this, because these two people are similar, Netflix recommends both these people the similar movies that they each one of them is watching, right? And this is called collaborative filtering, where we as a community who is watching movies on Netflix, we are giving the data to Netflix so that Netflix can recommend to other people that this is a movie that you might be interested in watching, right? And now there are a lot of things which goes behind this. There's an age criteria as well. For example, I'm, let's say, 21 years old, right? So if I'm 21 years old and somebody else is also 21 years old who shares similar interests as me, chances of me liking a movie and the other person also liking a movie would be more, right? Let's say I have similar interests and somebody else who is 32 or 33 years old also has similar interests. But the chances of us watching the same movie or same content would be unlikely. Why? Because there's an age gap, and hence we have a different maturity level as well.
Okay, so similarly, you have a second approach as well in recommendation engine, which is called content based filtering. Now, what is content based filtering? Content based filtering basically deals with content which is of similar kind, right? Let's say I don't want to go ahead and collect data from my users. I'm not doing that. In that case, what I can do is I can punch in data for each and every movie that I have published on my platform. So let's say I have a movie on action, which is going to have a lot of Hollywood actors, right? And I'm interested in that movie. The second movie that I also watch is also is also packed up with a lot of Hollywood actors, right? And it's also an action genre. So now what Netflix is going to recommend me is going to be of similar kind. The content is going to be of similar kind, right? And this is a very high level overview of how recommendation engine works. Obviously, there are a lot of other parameters also involved in it. Recommendation involves machine learning, right? And when I say machine learning, uh, don't get scared with that word. Machine learning is nothing but going through a lot of data that I just told you about. For example, who watched which movie, what are the different kind of interests that they have, and based on looking at all these different kind of criteria, the system recommends you a video. Now if a human were to do that, it will take a lot of time to analyze for each user how many videos to recommend. But when you give this similar task to a system, it can concurrently give it to all the users who are watching the movie on the streaming platform, which is Netflix. And that is in a gist what machine learning is all about. It basically processes a lot of data at the same time, and then it crunches out data which the human told it to crunch out. Okay, so that is what machine learning is, and that is exactly how recommendation engine and in a Netflix platform also works around it. Okay.
All right, guys. So now we'll begin with the coding part. And before we begin, I'd like to ask everyone, I'd like to see if everyone's joined in. And I'd like to firstly begin by giving you an overview of what we'll be doing in this session, in coding session, what we'll be building, how we'll be building it, and what are the things that we'll be taking a look at. So let me first begin by giving you an overview of what we'll be trying to do. In case you have any questions, please do raise them. So I'd like to show you what I'll be doing. So I have created a small API based application. We'll be using the technologies of Node.js, and for the database, we'll be using MongoDB. So MongoDB and Node.js go hand in hand. Now, for those of you who are unaware of these technologies, who have never worked with MongoDB, Node.js, it's completely fine. The aim of this webinar is not to show you what exactly the code is, but to show you how you go about creating something like Netflix, how you create the backend, how you create the front end, what do these terms mean, and how do you get about doing this. So I'd like to firstly begin by explaining to you how Netflix is built or how things happen in Netflix code wise. So the first thing is Netflix is divided into two parts, or any full stack application is divided into two parts basically, the front end and the back end. So front end and back end are quite popular terms, and I'm quite sure that many of you know what these mean. But for those of you who are unaware, front end is basically the thing that you see, that you interact with. Your browser renders these things, the images, the buttons, the layout, video player, your click events, everything that is associated with what the user sees and how they interact with it. That's associated with front end. So all the animations, all the sliding, everything, it's all associated with the front end. So let me just show you. This is what the image looks like. Now, Netflix has a really big department for front end, and they do a lot of stuff. They try to make their front end as responsive and as quick as possible. To do this, what they do is they divide their front end into small chunks or small pieces. So these pieces you can think of as small components. So libraries like React and Angular do the same thing. Someone has asked the question, Pallavi is asking, while coding what to install, as I have never used Node.js and all before. Another person has asked, where can you find the recording? Well, the recording will be sent to you via on your email. But for those of you who are wondering what to install and how to code, don't worry about most of it. For the things that we'll be using are Node.js and MongoDB, but you don't have to install them right away. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to show you how you go about coding these things, not what exactly the code is and what exactly are the features that we're building. We're trying to understand how to build Netflix from the ground up. So that's what I'll try to do here. So as you can see that it has several components of it, such as the search feature, your accounts, the TV shows, the slider, the background image, the play button, the information button. Everything is a component. And these components are basically things that are rendered on your screen and they interact with your clicks and with your gestures or however you interact with your websites. So someone has asked if you have never worked in MongoDB, can you understand? Yeah. So don't worry about if you've never worked with Node.js or MongoDB, or if you've never written single line of code. What For those of you who have, I'll be showing you how it works. But for those of you who haven't, try and get as much as possible about the architecture and how things are done. I'll show you what the process of getting a design specification and then building your code from there is. That's what's important. Learning a programming language and then building stuff on top of it is something that you do need to know. But for this session, you don't need to be a master in these kinds of things. Even if you have not worked with Node.js, you can still get a lot out of the content. So just stick around and you'll be fine here. So as I was saying that these are the components. Now this is the front end. For those of you who are unaware, front end is basically what you see. So as you've already seen the buttons and all that, but all of the data inside the front end is not encoded. So none of the things such as the movies list, things such as the name of the film and your account name, not everything is pre-encoded. So the thing that I'm trying to get across is when you create another account, a new HTML page for your account is not generated. What they do basically is they create something called a template. Now, for those of you who have worked with other kind of programming languages, you basically know what a template is, but let me just show you. Let's say that I want you to create some program in which what you do is I give you my name and you return hello space and the name that I just gave to you. So this is what is known as a template. You have some static data combined or interpolated with some dynamic content. And what you want to do in the template is you want to define the dynamic static data and leave places or slots for dynamic content that you will get from some other place. You could get it from an external web service. You can get it from your own APIs. You can get it from a JSON file. You can get it from lots of multiple sources. So you can, or you may, basically you could also get it from the user. That's also possible. So there's a lot of things that you can do. So essentially, for instance, for the name thing, if I type hello space and I leave and I write it like this basically means, and don't worry about the syntax, what the time I'm trying to get across is that the hello, comma, and space, these are the things that are static. Now we talk about dynamic content. There's a variable with the name that the user has given me. They have given me their name and I have stored it inside a memory location, and that memory location is given the identifier of name. So whenever I try to reference name, that is what will be referenced. So with that in mind, this is what it is. And now for the dynamic content in our Netflix application, what happens is we have the backend that serves us the data that we want to fill the template with. So what happens here is that the backend is associated with a database or a DB, as you might call it. What the DB does is that it stores everything that you might need to send back to the front end so that it can build the entire page or the entire user interface. So it could contain things that might not even be visible on the screen, such as the user's username and password. So username and password. Now the user will input these things from the front end. Our backend will take that, verify that the username and password exist and are both associated in our database. And if that does exist, then we tell our front end that yes, the user exists, authenticate him, and let him do the task that he wants to do. So other things that backend can do is the authorization, which is basically when the user tries to delete some content or make changes to the content that isn't there. Or so for instance, in Netflix you have multiple accounts, and from one account you can give access to other accounts and change those accounts. Those are called primary accounts. So whether or not one account is primary or secondary, the user has logged into it, that's called authorization part. Essentially the flow happens like this: the front end renders, or basically what happens is front end is loaded. After it loads, it sends a request to the backend to get the data that we want to fill our entire page with. So for our Netflix example, the data that we want to fill it with are these images, this last days of America's crime, the title of the movie, these things such as the notification, unread notification count, the account title, and the play button, and all of that. So we want to get all of this content from the web page. So basically, just it's just text and some data. So we want the name of the file. We want to do these things. So here, what we do is we get the data from the backend. The backend goes ahead, queries the database, and returns the data that it wants to return. Now, an important part to understand is that we want to return it in a format that everyone can understand. So let's say that my front end is built in JavaScript, but backend could be built in any language. The reason why we separate these things is because separating them makes it easy for us to build the backend and front end separately. Even if the front end is not complete, we can still continue with building features in the backend and adding features and refining the features. So what happens here is that we use a format called JSON. Again, it is a programming term. Most of you might not be aware of it, but basically JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's a lightweight data interchange format. It looks something like this. So this is one row of data that we'll be exchanging. And the properties that I want to exchange, let's say the ID of the movie. So let's say the ID is one. Name of the movie, you can name it anything. Let me just name it demo. And there could be multiple things that you might want to show to the user, such as the movie's ratings, the release date, the genre, which all of this will be taking a look at in a moment. But this is all there is. So this is the flow of the application. The reason why things are broken up like this is because we want our applications to be completely decoupled. We want our application to be built by two separate teams, and those teams would have communications, but it's not necessarily the case that if some feature in front end is having a particular bug, or we are not able to build that feature on time, the backend would not be stagnant. The backend team can still churn out the features that we need for other UI frameworks or other applications to work. Another good thing is that the front end could be multiple things. So it could be your website, it could be an Android app, it could also be an iOS app, could be a Fire TV app, it could be Amazon OS, or many other kinds of applications. So all they have to do is they have to send the request to our server. Our backend will pick up those requests. If those requests are valid, then we send back the response. So that's what this is. This is why we have front end and back end completely separated. Hopefully you guys understood this. If you have any questions, please raise them now, but make sure that the questions are about the differences between front end and back end. And any other question about coding, we'll be taking a look at the coding part. And if you have any questions about that, then raise them then. But if you have any questions, then do raise them. I'll be more than happy to answer. So with that, let me just show you what exactly we're trying to do. So whenever you're trying to build an application, the first thing that you should do is you should write something called a spec or specification. So these are the features that we'll be taking a look at. We'll be taking a look at if we have a library of movies, and if the user asks for a particular term, let's say that they search for the keyword of dark, and we have lots of movies like Dark Knight Rises or The Dark Knight or many other, Black Delilah, or any other kind of movie that's associated with the word dark, and we want to send it back to the user. This is how we do it. Our application will be locally hosted, so you don't need to have a web server for your own purposes. You can create a local server, and which I'll show you how to do in a moment. And basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to create URLs that you can send requests to, get the response back, parse that request or make sense of that request, and then populate your front end with the data that is returned from the backend or from the response that you got by querying a URL. So this is the URL we have created /search. You might have seen this being used in multiple places, and we're basically passing this, which is a query string. A query string basically allows you to tack on a lot of information behind the scenes. So we're saying, okay, for the value of Q, I want dark. This is the thing that I want to query. Our backend will pick this up, look into our database, find out things that contain the word dark, and then we send back all the data that we get by querying the word keyword dark. We send it back to the user and they take a look at it. Similarly, we can list by genre. So if the user says, okay, show me all the movies that are belonging to the action genre. So we say, okay, send a request to this URL, and the data we want to send along is the genre that the user has requested us to give them. So the genre is action, and we give them all the movies. Here we can also show them that, okay, this is the URL. We want you to basically view the top 20 most viewed videos. So if you take a look at YouTube and you take a look at the most trending tab, this is how the feature is built. Netflix had something similar. This is how that is built. And finally, the streaming part. So how do you get the URL to stream your data? Now, again, as it was explained earlier in the PPT, that we don't have the entire server setup and we have not deployed it to the cloud, we'll be hosting some of the URLs locally, and those small videos will be hosted locally, and I'll show you how to embed that video in a web page. So we'll take a look at that. Now with the specification that we get, which is this one, these are all the features that we want, and it contains, usually specifications are very verbose. They contain a lot of things such as what to do when the things go wrong, what is the shape of the response, and so on. But for our purposes, this is what the specification is, and this is what our database will look like. So I have a NoSQL database called MongoDB. Basically, this is the name of the table, if you are aware of SQL databases such as MySQL or other databases. And these are the fields that I want, an ID or the identifier from which we can uniquely identify a movie. So even if two movies have different names, we have assigned a unique number to it, so from which we can recognize, similar to the roll number that you're given when you enter a school or join a school or a college. The name, the release date, genre, rating, and view count. It's important to note that we have entered all of that data in the database, and I'll show you how we've done that. Don't worry about it. And the videos table will contain the ID of the movie that you want the location of the video file to, and the location, which contains the name of the video file. So if I have a movie such as Lord of the Rings, which was released in 2001, and it has an ID of 2, now I want to get the video URL of any movie that has the ID 2. Since we have IDs to be unique, so content ID will be 2, and the location will be name of the movie, which could be Lord of the Rings 1. I'll show you how that works in a moment. This is what the database looks like. The benefit of using a NoSQL database, and Netflix uses NoSQL databases as well, is that you don't have to create the schema, or you don't have to create the table yourself. You don't have to describe to the database management system that this is what the table should be, these are the rows, these are the columns, these are the constraints on the columns. You can just basically tell them, okay, this is what I expect the user to pass in. If they don't, then they then leave those fields blank. I don't care about that. Is the table structure defined in JSON? So in other kinds of NoSQL databases, there could be other formats, but here, since we're using MongoDB, it will be defined in JSON. So you are correct in assuming that. So what is the location? Is it the path of the system? Yeah, so the location would be the location of the video file that our video player will get that it wants to play. So for instance, we need to have a video file such as for an MP4 file that we need the location for, so that the video player could play those videos. So basically we'll be sending the entire URL to the video player, and that video player will take a look at that URL, embed it in the source, and it will show us. So in case it didn't make much sense, don't worry, we'll take a look at some code and it will show you. Okay, this is what the specification is. We have got the database. Now for those of you, I just like to show you, this is my MongoDB shell. Shell is basically how you interact with a database by passing commands. So let me just show you the databases. Now I have a Netflix database. This is the database that I have created so far. There are other databases that come with MongoDB by default. So I'll be using Netflix, and now we have switched to Netflix. Now I would like to take a look at the collections. Collections are basically the tables and we have media and the videos databases, similar to what we have here. This is the media, which is basically the information about the movie that we want to see, and videos is basically the path of the video associated to that. The reason why I have separated both of them is because these could be worked on by two teams. One team would be the one that is updating the information, and the other team is the one that is taking care of inserting the binary data or the video file on the Netflix servers and then replicating them and all of that. So that's how that works. Um, this is what we have. And again, if you have MongoDB but you don't have all of this, I'll show you what to do. So now we'll be jumping into some code. But before we do, uh, let me just show you one other thing, which is the command prompt. So this is the command prompt. This is where we type in the command, and the software that I'm using to build the backend, the language that I'm using is called Node. I have the 10.16.1 version, and this is not the latest version, but it works. So if you are trying to follow along and if you have MongoDB and Node.js, you can follow along quite easily. If you don't have that, don't worry, just take a look at the code. The video will be available to you later on. You can install these things very easily, and it's quite easy to do that. How to set up the MongoDB instance and Node.js. So basically, you just go to their websites and download their setups. I won't be showing it entirely, but let me just show you. Type in Node.js, go to the download button and download the one that's for your user interface or for your operating system. Mine is Windows and I want the MSI. So I already have it. I won't be downloading it again. And for MongoDB, just type MongoDB, go to their download center or just click on here. It opens up in a few moments. Go to software, don't go to cloud, although MongoDB does provide you with the option of getting data from the cloud. You should go to the software tab, go to the community server. This is the one that we'll be using. Community servers are great for us to install. Enterprise servers are for business enterprises and they need advanced security mechanisms to work and you need to pay for them. But if you are a developer, you can use the community server. Get the information, select the operating system, select the package, which will be automatically selected to the latest package, and just download it. Now you install them like any other system that you install, and with that, we get back to the code. Now, what we will do is firstly, we will have to initialize a Node.js project. I have already done that, but the way to do it is you go npm, which stands for Node Package Manager. This is installed when you install Node.js and it will be available in your command prompt. After you've typed npm, you type init init and dash dash y and press enter. So once you have done this, your the folder in which you want to create your project will have this file package.json. That's all you need for your application, for your folder to become a Node.js application. So this is what it looks like. The information that it will ask for is the name of the project, the version, description, main, and these are the things that I have added, and I'll show you what that means. It will ask for the name of the author. I have kept most of the applications as simply blank, and these are the dependencies, which I'll show you what they mean. So with that in mind, now the thing that we need is we need to install certain packages. So to give you an example, a package is basically some code that someone has already written for us to use. So if you want to hash a user's password, you don't want to go through the entire mathematical concepts of writing the entire code to get the entire password and hash it. What you do is that you get the user's password and then you use some library code and hash it. That will hash it for you. So with that in mind, we use a certain libraries. First one is NodeMon. What it does is that it takes a look at your server files and then it loads it again. So if you make any changes, if you try to make any changes and you save those changes and then you run them again, then your server will be loaded automatically. I'll show you what that means in a moment. This is installed in a dev dependency, which basically means that when I deploy my application, this is something that I don't need. This is only for development. But dependencies that I'm going to be needing even when the application is deployed, we use Express.js, which is an web application framework. It allows you to build a web server quite easily, and Mongoose, which is a library that allows us to interact with the MongoDB database. So we'll take a look at both of them. So would you share the code and MongoDB content? Yeah, sure. So I'll share you the code and the MongoDB content will work just as well. Now let's go with, I have created some default data, and that's what seeding means. So when you're building an application, one thing you need is you need a database that contains some default information so that you can get it from the database and then you can get it from there. Yeah, the recording will be available and the link will be sent to your email after the session ends. So what we'll be trying to do is we'll try to seed the databases. So let me just show you. I use the node command and I run this file, which is seed underscore media.js and seed underscore lib.js. So I'll just show you what that means. These are the two files. And again, the code looks very daunting. Don't worry about it. I'll just explain what code means, what this code is trying to accomplish, and you'll know. For someone who's asking how to get the package.json file, it's quite easy. Just open the command prompt in the folder that you want to use it. You want to create a package.json file or you want to create a node package, and type npm init and press enter, and you can fill out the information. Or if you don't want to fill out the information, then just pass in the flag y, which means enter all the default information and don't bother about it. So now that we have that, let me go back. So we are using Mongoose and we are using the models and all that, and I'll show you what all of that means. But before that, if you want to install a package, after you have initialized the project, run npm install. And since I wanted to install nodemon, I use save dev because I want to save it as a development dependency. It should not be sent to the dev production package. I press enter, and since I already have it installed, it's going to be rather quick, but it will take a look at the metadata, which basically means, okay, this library needs some other libraries, so I'll have to download those libraries might need some other libraries. So all of this is done for you. Now it takes a look at it, and since we already have, we get the package itself. Now I want to install the Mongoose and Express package, so I type Express and Mongoose, and instead of save dev, I type nothing, and I would press enter, but it'll take some time, and we're running short on time, so I'll just not press enter. But you can if it's your new project. And what you do there after that is every library that you want to use is available on your project. So all you have to do then is just reference them, like the one that I have done here. Basically, I'm saying, okay, give me access to the Mongoose file and give me access to the media model. Let me just show you what model is. A model is basically a description of what your database should look like. So someone asked, why did we install Express and Mongoose? These are libraries that allow us to create our web servers and interact with the database. So don't worry about those kinds of things. Basically, what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, I want an ID column with the data to be numbers. So anything that I put into ID should be numeric. 1, 2, 5, 7 are all valid. A, B, C, D are invalid. Name is a string, release date should be date, and if I don't provide a value, insert the current date. Genre is a string, rating is number, view count is number. The reason why we are giving it a data type and explaining what kind of data we are expecting, it's mainly because this data is important. And if we don't give it the data type, then user can enter any kind of data. In the view count, if someone trips up and makes a mistake, they'll be entering A, B, C, D, and our database will just accept it. That will be a problem. So Node.js is the runtime, or is the language that we'll be using. JavaScript is the language, Node.js is the runtime, or is how you write JavaScript on the backend. And Express.js is the package. It allows us to write web servers more efficiently and more quickly. It follows best practices, so you don't have to worry about a lot of things like parsing the request, getting the headers, and all of that. With that, so we go back to our seeding file. We connect to the database by just saying if there is an error, then log it to the console. Otherwise, just connect to localhost colon 27017. This is the URL of my database server. If you have installed Node.js on your system, this is the default database, and this is the name of the database that I want. If it's not already there, then create it. If it's there, then use it. We send keep alive to be 1, which means that don't close the connection immediately. Use URL parser and use unified topology or some advanced features that you don't need to worry about. Just type this code and it'll run. This is the data that we'll be inserting, movie names. You can take a look at them. We are inserting IDs and we are inserting the ratings as well. So we are inserting 6 movies, and then we use the seed movies function, in which I basically, if the database already exists, then I delete it. How to get the link of database. So basically, once you have installed MongoDB, then all you need to do is use this link. This is the URL that MongoDB lives on your local system. If you're deploying it to cloud, then how to do it will be shown to you tomorrow session, but here it's now. So with that, we just drop, if we already have a table of media table in which we have inserted this information, then remove that. And if it doesn't exist, then don't worry about it. And then insert many function is used to insert all the data that we have just defined, and we'll be using that. So the reason why we are using all of these seed lib and seed media library is because we need some data in our database so that our API can send it to you. So basically, all I have to do now, let me just show you the seed lib library as well. It does the same thing we have, but instead of that, we will be saving the name of the files of name of the video files. Let me just open up my folder in the Netflix clone, which is the folder that I have a folder called __ videos. I have a file that I have copied and I have given them name. So Dark, Lord of the Rings 1, 2, 3, Suits, and Dark Knight. These are the suppose these are the actual videos, but we don't want to spend the entire 10 GB of our disk space. So I have created a simple copied a simple Windows 7 default video, and then I have pasted it multiple times and changed the name. But you can imagine it to be something else. Now all I've done is I've saved it. I've said okay. The media with the ID of 1. So if you take a look at this, ID 1 is given to Dark Knight Rises or the Dark Knight. So media with the ID of 1, I want to get the video location of that. So I send the media ID and I get the Dark Knight. I know the location as well, so I'll just prepend it and I'll show it. How to run these files. I'll show you how to run these files. Don't worry about it when we get to it. So we get the movie data, and we have associated a file name with the ID of the movies. So the fourth one is Lord of the Rings Return of the King, which is the third one, or the third Lord of the Rings. So we have Lord of the Rings 3.mp4. These are the name of the video files. You can imagine that these names could be something else because two movies with the same name could also be released. So that could be a problem. So with that, we create a seed movies function in which we just delete the video model or video collection if it exists. And if it doesn't exist, then we insert all the data and we close the connection. And we call the seed movies function here. So now if I want to seed the data, all I have to do is I have to run these files. And instead of typing this entire thing, the entire command, what I can do is I can just use the power of Node.js, and I can just run npm uh, run. Run is a special command. When I type run and then I type seed colon, as you can see, it's media, and press enter, what it will do is it will take a look at the script tag, which is here, and it will try and find the thing that I just passed as the argument, which is seed colon media. So it takes a look at the script, seed media is this, and it replaces everything with this command, and we run this. Similarly, with seed media, I can type seed lib and it will run, and everything ran perfectly. We didn't run into any errors, which is good. Now, if I want to take a look at the data, I can just go db.media.find, and I want to get all the files. So I just type this. Now we can see the files or we can see the data, but it's not very pretty to look at. It's not very readable. So MongoDB gives us a function called pretty. and I have misspelled it. And as you can see, we have inserted all the movies that we wanted to insert. And if I want to take a look at the videos that I have inserted, as you can see, I had the videos collection or the videos table, videos, press enter, and media ID and location is inserted. So everything's working perfectly. Now I'll just show you the code and show you what we're doing. So this is what we have, and I type it npm run start, press enter, and what it will do is take a look at the script stack, take a look at the start one, and it says nodemon index.js. Now what happens? It runs. Now remember I told you the reason why we're using nodemon is because we want to reload our server. Whenever we make changes to our code, server is running in memory. So if I want to make changes to my code and then replace the already running instance of the server with the current changes that I've made, what I do, I go here. Let's say for instance, I go to the, let me just close all of them, and I go to index.js. And what I do is instead of listening for incoming request, I type listening at port 8000. And yeah, and just take a look at what happens when I save it. Okay, take a look at this section. I save it, and as soon as I save it, it restarts due to the changes, and it restarts the index.js file, which is the entry file. So this is why we're using a nodemon, so that it reloads our server whenever we make changes, so that those changes will be reflected. Now let's take a look at what's happening. So this is the index file, which is the main file of our application. When we start it, what happens is it gets the web server that I have created. It starts the web server and listens on the port 8000. And if there is an environment variable that's already set, it takes a look at that. And when the server is established, everything is working, we console.log listening at port 8000. So this is what's happening here. Now let's go to the web server. I'll just close everything else. So firstly, we're saying that, okay, in the static folder and in the videos folder, whatever you see is all static content. Static content, you can take a look at it. It's basically just HTML files and video files. So if I show you the videos folder, it contains all the videos so that the user can access it without any problem. And the static folder contains an HTML file, which I'll show you in a moment, that contains our video player. So now what we do is we define certain routes. Routes are basically, if I would just show you, in our spec, we had defined certain URLs. So routes are this part. This is the route. This is the query parameter. The reason why we describe this is we want our application to respond to only certain requests. So if the request that is sent to a URL is not /search /content /video or /library, we don't want to send it to, we don't want to respond to it. We just say, okay, we don't know what that is. You have entered an incorrect URL, and we go ahead and do anything else that we can. Uh, the webinar will be going on for 15 to 20 more minutes. I'll explain you the code and then we'll be ending. So I'll try and do it very quickly. So this is what it looks like. Basically, what we're saying is when the request, you send the request to /search URL, what I want you to do is I want you to extract the query parameter named Q. Again, if I show you, this is the URL and Q is dark. This is the name or the keyword that the user is looking for in a movie. So whichever movie has the word dark in it is the one that we want to return. So we get it. We check whether or not it's available, whether or not user has typed in a query, or whether or not the query has some data. If it does, then we want to return something. But if it doesn't have anything in it, basically the user has sent nothing for us to search for, and we send the request back. We send the response as nothing to search. But if he has, then what we do is we call a function named search by term. We open that function, and here it is. So here it is. And here what we're doing is we're taking a look at a repository, and in this repository we're finding the data by name and the query that the user has sent. Query contains the name of the file. Here it will be dark that the user has sent. Now let me just show you what the repository is. The reason why I have broken things up into such level is because later on it's easier for you. When building Netflix, people break their application into small modules. These modules basically allow you to separate your internal logic from external concerns. So if tomorrow somebody comes up and says we want to use an SQL database instead of a MongoDB database, all you would have to do is you would have to create a new folder called SQL repository. Make sure that that repository has a function defined by name that takes in name and query and returns the data. And you can basically do it without any problems. So what happens is we go to our movies repository and we say find by, give it the parameter, give it the term, and it creates a regular expression, which basically means that even if the movie's name is darkness beyond, it still contains the word dark, and uh, this is the word dark, and we're passing in GNI, which means search the entire length of the data and find anywhere if it's dark. If it's named something like this is also something that you need to return. And I means that we want it to be case insensitive. So even though here D is capitalized and in a search term D is small, we still want you to give it back to the user. So yeah, the code will be given to you later on. You can contact our team to know more about it. So this is what we have. And let me take a look at the code. Since we have changed the files and saved it multiple times, you can see it's restarting again and again. Now to take a look at the data that we get, we can obviously go to our localhost /8000/search, and q is equals to, I'll pass in dark, press enter, and this is the data that we get. We get the ID, name, release date, genre, rating, and view count. This is the data that we were interested in. But if I don't pass in anything in queue, it gives nothing to search. Or if I forget to pass in the query parameter at all, it gives nothing to search. So this is the expected behavior, and this is what we get. Now let's take a look at the other routes. Here we are. In the content section, what we want is we want to search by genre. So any request that we get for /content and we have the genre as action, we want to return that. So what we do is we get the genre the same as before. We check whether or not the user has given us the information that we need. If not, we send nothing to match, and we send search by genre. We pass in the repository, we pass in the genre, and we let the function take care of the entire coding process. So again, if tomorrow they say that, okay, you have to use SQL, so I can create another file named SQL movie repository. I will write the code, import it, and then send it here. And that's all the changes that I would have to make. So with that, let's take a look at this. Now, if I go to the search by genre, here it is, search by genre. I open it up, it's inside this file, and it's doing the same thing, but here we're finding by genre instead of name. So we can reuse the code that we have already written instead of typing it again and again. We go back and we can type, instead of this, we can type content and genre is fantasy. Yeah. So we get all the movies with the genre as fantasy, as you can see. And if I don't want it to be fantasy, I want it to be action. Press enter, and this is the only movie that has the genre of action in our one. Is MongoDB comes with UI interface to view? Yeah, so MongoDB has many user interfaces that allow you to take a look at the data. We're not going to be taking a look at that because that's beyond the scope and we're running short on time. But you can basically take a look at that. One of that is called Mongo Compass. I think I already have it in my system, but you can take a look at that at some later time. Okay, now since we get the data, I won't be showing you the entire code. This will be uploaded and you can take a look at that. But what I wanted to show you next was inside the web server. We have the videos library. So we find the top 10 viewed videos. Now, this is a really interesting one because we want to be able to pass in the limit, but if the user has not passed in the limit, we want to return the first top 5 videos. So what we do is we just find the limit the user has sent. If the user has not sent any limit, then just assign 5 as the default value. Now we check whether or not the limit that the user did pass was undefined or it was not a number. So if the user passed in limit as A, B, C, D or the name of the movie, we have to send incorrect request as the response. Otherwise, we find the top K viewed. Now this is interesting, so I'll show you this one. So find top viewed, we go there, and here we just go to the repository and find the top viewed. If you take a look at the repository, in the movie repository, what happens is I get the by and limit, and I want to get it by what I want to. So basically what I do is then I sort the entire movies that I have. Let's say I have 7 movies. Here it is dynamic. Yeah, so here it's dynamic because we are sending back the data that the user is asking for instead of sending some static content like the entire movies list. So we find all the movies, we sort them in descending order by the parameter that the user has passed in. Here we'll be passing in the view count, and then we limit it to what the user has instructed. It's either going to be 5 or what the user has instructed. And if we can't do it, if we run into an error, that we return null. Mainly if you're dealing with error corrections, then you can basically log it to the database. But here we're doing this. So now if I go back to our data, videos, and I press enter, so as you can see, we have the top 5 viewed: 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. These are the top 5 values. But if I pass in the limit, and as you can see, they are sorted according to their view count. So the view count of 5,800 is the highest one, and we go down 4,200 is the fifth one from the top. But if I type in limit to be, let's say, 2, so give me the top 2 viewed videos, and we have these two. So it highly saves the bandwidth. If you only want a few chunks of the data, our database will do the work for them. And now finally we have the user's video file name. So if the user gives me the name, the media ID, I will give him back the link to the video that they can either download or play it in a video player. What happens now is, let's go here. I have the library section. I go here, press in library, and media ID is 1. The movie with the ID of 1 in our database is The Dark Knight. So I want the link to the video file for The Dark Knight. What I do is I send it here, and it sends me this URL. If I open it up here, it'll download the video for me, which I don't want, but it's already done this, so it's fine. But let me just show you what happens if I load the basic localhost. So this is what the Dark Knight URL looks like. Let me just show you the code here. And this is, we're using the default HTML5 video player. This is the video player. I have defined the width and the height, and this is the URL that the API would have returned. So what we can do is we can create a front end from which we request the data, and we get this data, and then we replace the current one that we have with the data that we get. This is the name of the file. If I play it, it will work just fine. Now again, Netflix has a much more complicated system in which they have to firstly take a look at the data that they have, then they have to convert it into multiple platforms depending on the platform that the user is using, user the encoder, and there are a lot of things that they need to take care of. So this is how that works. If you want to take a look at the file here, I'll just show you. The code is basically, it's a static HTML file. If I open it, here's what it looks like. This is the data that we have. So this is what we have here. And now the code is done. A few notes about the code that I'd like to show you. For those of you who will download the code, I have created a readme file. Let me just rename it because I misspelled readme to readme. It has the instructions to run the code. Basically, you install Node.js and MongoDB, install all the required software, open the terminal in the folder that you want to run the code from. So this Netflix clone folder, wherever you have it, open your terminal or command prompt there. As you can see, I've opened it there. Then type in these commands, npm install. If it's the first time that you're running the software, then you type npm install. After that, you can run it however you want. And one thing you'll notice is that after you run this command, this folder named node modules will be automatically created for you. This will contain all the libraries that you wanted to use. Then we seed the databases by running seed media and seed library, and then we start our web API. And this is the API that we use. This is the API that Netflix, these are the kinds of API that Netflix builds. Right now, it might not be available on GitHub, but tomorrow it will be, by tomorrow it will be available. So don't worry about that. And we'll share the link for you. And if you want the link, you can contact our support team as well. With that, I'd like to just end on a note to make you understand what exactly are we doing here. So firstly, we get the spec sheet. We break down features into the technical components that we want to build. The things that we want to build are, these are the kind of things that we want to build. We want to build a web server. That web server's job is basically get the request, parse the request, and send back the response. Those responses are built via the use cases. They take in repositories, which are basically connections to database. And what we do is we tell them, okay, these are the databases that we have, and I want you to get data from the database like this. So our use cases, all they do is that they orchestrate our interaction. Here they just call a method and pass in the required field, and that's what we do. If our use case expands, so let's say that I want to introduce caching here as well, so I can pass in a cache manager. Misspelled the word cache there. And here cache dot set, if it's not already set, then I can pass in the media ID or whatever. So I can do it that way there as well. Let me just change everything so that we're, yeah. So that's what this means. Basically, when you're building an application, especially when software developers at Netflix are building application, what they do is they break their application into smaller components, such as the web server, the database connection, the actions that we want to perform, static files, videos, database seeding, all of that. So I've created folders for all of them. Hopefully that gives you a good idea. And now we've come to the end of the session, but before we get by, I'd like to ask you a few questions so that you can answer them in the chat box. So here's the quiz for you to solidify your understanding. The first question is the Netflix homepage static or dynamic? Write your answers in the question box and I'll be able to see them and tell you. Whoever can answer, please do answer. So Kishore has said static, Sri Ganesh has said dynamic. Some people have said dynamic, some are saying static. So for those of you who want to know the correct answer, it is dynamic. The reason why is because it gets data that is updated by the API. So basically it shows you the skeleton of the page and the most viewed movies, the images, the information about those images, all of this is gotten from the API and it's just populated there. So it's a dynamic one. Those of you who answered the option B, dynamic, are correct. Second question is Netflix videos are of which of the following, static or dynamic? Those of you who know the answer, please type in the answer. So, okay, so the majority of people or all the people are saying static, and that's correct. It's very static, and that's why we're using it. Finally, which one is better for privacy? Which recommendation engine is better for privacy? Collaborative filtering or content-based filtering? For those of you who have forgotten, collaborative filtering is the one where we take a look at your viewing history as well as some other viewers' viewing history. And based on your and your viewer, another user's viewing history similarity, we recommend you things. On content-based, we take a look at the content and then we take a look at similar content in our library and then we recommend you those things. So for those of you who have answered, content-based filtering are correct because it does not require us to take a look at other person's it does not require the Netflix API to take a look at other person's viewing history. So content-based filtering is the correct one and collaborative filtering is the incorrect one. So this was a bit of a tricky question, but it's fine if you've not gotten the answer. It's totally fine. And with that, thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully this session has been interactive and helpful to you. Hopefully if you have any questions, you can type it out right now. I have a few more minutes that I'll be able to answer, and after that I will end the session, and with that we'll be done. So if you have any questions, you can answer. Yeah. Someone has asked what platform are you using? So I'm using Windows operating system, and Node.js is the platform. And the tools that I'm using, I'll just show you what are the tools. Mm, and by the way, if you want to contact us, these are the numbers that you can take a look at to contact us, and these are the email IDs that you want to contact us on. Yeah. So tomorrow's schedule is also at 7:30, so you can join us at 7:30. Um, And for those of you who are wondering what is the IDE that I'm using, it's Visual Studio Code. I'll just show you. I go to About. Visual Studio Code. It's not Visual Studio, it's Visual Studio Code. It's a lighter version of Visual Studio. Those of you who have done any .NET development will know what that means. Is it free? Yeah, it's completely free. Any certification for Node.js, our Intellipaat.com website has a lot of certifications for front-end, back-end development, and full-stack development. So if you have any questions, you can ask our course advisors by contacting them on the screen, on the information on the screen. How can I help this? How can I make this with pre-built template? So that's part of the front end which we didn't have the time to cover today because we run out of time. But if you want to take a look at how to do this, you can ask our team and they'll arrange a session for that as well. But the main part here that you need to understand is that you need to take a look at the problem, how to solve it, and how to come up with the components as people do. Visual Studio Code is completely free. If you want to download, you can take a look at that. With that in mind, we have come to the end. Sublime Text is also quite good. I used to use Sublime Text, but then I came across Windows Visual Studio Code, and it's been far more productive for me. So I've been using that. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully, this has been informative to you. I'll be ending the session. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, you can contact us anytime. Thank you.